Oh my God, I can't believe I did that. I'm such a loser. God, I suck at doing this. Everyone must think I'm pathetic. Do better, Sam. Do better, Sam. Pathetic. Hey INFJ, did that seem familiar to you? As an INFJ, do you also have an inner critic? That voice that is constantly in the background, telling you to do better or be better. It's exhausting, hey? As an INFJ myself, who has overcome the loudness of having this INFJ inner critic, I want to let you know that it doesn't always need to be like this. Hey there, I'm Sam and I'm an Australian-based counsellor for INFJs, introverts and empaths. In this week's video, I want to share with you 3 reasons why the INFJ might struggle with having this inner critic, this inner chatter that happens inside our heads. But more importantly, I want to give you 6 practical tips that you can begin implementing today to help you overcome the loudness of the inner critic. INFJ, just because you're an INFJ and you're more likely to have this inner critic, more likely than other personality types, it doesn't mean that you need to let this inner critic control your life. There is a way to dim it, there is a way to make it become quieter in the background. Let's get into it. The first reason why an INFJ might struggle with having this inner critic is having high standards for yourself as an INFJ. This has always rang true for me ever since I was a little girl, and I'm sure it does for you too. As INFJs, we are perfectionists. And gosh, I feel like I talk about INFJ and perfectionism all of the time. You are probably getting sick of it, but it does seem to be a pretty big problem that INFJs have. We set incredibly high expectations on ourselves. We want to live up to our own ideals, whether that's as a mum, being the perfect mum, or best friend, partner, business owner, employee, daughter, sister, brother, uncle, whatever it is, we have these ideals, our own ideals of what that should look like. And normally we set those standards pretty high because we care so deeply about making a positive impact on the world, and we care so deeply about these roles that we're in. Such as for myself, I see being a mum to be really important. So I set these massive expectations for me to meet so that when you make a mistake or you have a flaw, we can feel like the biggest failure. We can start telling ourselves, as an example with motherhood, like, oh my gosh, I'm a terrible mom, I'm the worst mom in the world, which is such a shame because I don't know about you, but I've never met a perfect human being before. We all make mistakes. The inner critic then becomes this constant voice reminding us that we're not doing enough, even when we're giving everything that we have, even when we're giving it all, even when we are diving head first and we're really, really trying. We hear that voice that tells us, you're not doing it, you're a failure. The second reason why an INFJ might struggle with having this inner critic is overthinking and having that self-reflection. Now, firstly, I don't think this is necessarily a bad thing. It's great that we have self-reflection. Us INFJs, we are natural deep thinkers, and we don't want to change that about ourselves. We're constantly processing our emotions, experiences, and interactions, often wondering, how can we improve to do better the next time? I mean, this is great, right? This leads to self-growth, but it can also invite overthinking, where we can get stuck replaying information over and over and over again. Ugh. The inner critic tends to magnify these thoughts, making us question our decisions or worry about things that could have been done differently, even in situations that were completely out of our control. This can become quite paralyzing and unhealthy for us. Although self-reflection is a wonderful skill, we cannot use it to become our own enemy. Reason number 3 why INFJs might struggle with having that inner critic: empathy and sensitivity to others. Again, this is such a beautiful gift to have. This is nothing to be ashamed of. The world, especially right now, it needs our empathy and it needs our sensitivity to others. But because INFJs are so attuned to the feelings of others, we can sometimes forget to give ourselves that same level of compassion. We might be quick to forgive others for their mistakes, but we hold ourselves to a much higher standard. This sensitivity to both our own feelings and emotions of those around us creates an inner conflict, wanting to help and heal others, but feeling like we're falling short in our own personal growth or emotional needs. Our inner critic is just another way that we may struggle to show ourselves the same kindness that we are extending to others. Imagine if we could silence the inner critic and give ourselves the same level of compassion and support, the same level of grace and forgiveness. If this inner critic didn't play such a vital role in our lives, what is it that we could then go on and do and achieve? What is it that we could do that would leave a positive impact on the world? So often our inner critic, it stops us from doing the things that we dream of. It stops us from following our heart's desires. It stops us from taking action towards our goals. Basically, in short, us INFJs, we are highly self-aware, empathetic, and driven to live authentically. But sometimes those very qualities that make us compassionate towards others can lead us to become overly critical to ourselves. It's like we're always striving to live up to our highest potential, but our inner voice, that inner critic, can make us feel like we're never gonna quite reach it. How then, INFJ, can we silence the inner critic? How can we live a life where this voice isn't so loud? Hey, before I share with you some practical tips on silencing the inner critic, if you're liking this video so far, then it would mean the world to me if you could either subscribe to my channel, like this video, or leave a comment. The good old algorithm of YouTube seems to love it when people do this, and the more love that I get on this video, the more INFJs that this video will reach out to, meaning the more people I can help and the bigger we can grow this community together. Thank you. I'm going to share with you 6 practical strategies that you can try to help silence the inner critic. The first strategy is practicing self-compassion. It's important that you start treating yourself the way you would treat a friend. When you begin to hear the inner critic start its usual chatter, try asking yourself, would I say this to someone that I care about? If the answer is no, then you can gently remind yourself that it's okay to make mistakes. Self-compassion is key here. It was key for my own life. I had the worst inner critic. What I used to tell myself for years on end, I would not wish that upon my worst enemy. But when I started practicing self-compassion, I was able to dim that voice to, I don't even hear it anymore. And when I do hear it, it does not overtake my life, and I'm able to get myself out of that place. It's not about being perfect, but it's about being kind to yourself, especially when you fall short of your own expectations. Which, as an INFJ who has high expectations on yourself, you're probably going to do this quite often. which means it's extra important that you practice speaking kind words to yourself. You might find that as you change your inner chatter, it will then change the way that you feel about yourself, and in turn, when you change the way you feel about yourself, that will change the way you operate in the world, and that will allow you to take more risk. It will allow you to step out of your comfort zone and to try new things, to try that thing that you've always wanted to do, but that inner critic has stopped you. Just as an example of practicing self-compassion, if you screw up at work, and you know what, we all at some point screw up at work, right? Instead of hyper-focusing on the failure, you could try thinking, it's okay. I'll learn from this and I'll do better next time. Okay, the second thing you could try is changing negative thoughts with a reframe. As INFJs, we tend to overanalyze situations. When we catch ourselves in the loop of these negative thoughts, one helpful tool is to grab onto that thought and then reframe it. This does not mean ignoring the problem, but rather looking at it from a different angle. An example of reframing a thought. If you hear your inner critic saying, "You're not good enough," you could try reframing it to something more balanced, like, "I'm doing the best I can and I'm learning along the way." If you feel like, for example, that you're not doing a great job on a project, you might reframe your thoughts to, "I did my best given the circumstances and I can see areas where I can grow." Can you see how this is also allowing that self-compassion to come through? A third thing you can try is mindfulness and grounding exercises. Sometimes the inner critic can be overwhelming, especially when it's tied to anxiety or stress. Mindfulness exercises, like focusing on the breath, doing a body scan, or simply grounding yourself in the present moment, that can help quiet the critical voice, that inner critical voice. When INFJs bring themselves to the here and now, which, mind you, this can be hard for an INFJ to do, so it's a great skill for INFJs to practice, to come back into the here and now and into our body. But when we do this, we can then distance ourselves from the negative thoughts that flood our mind. It's like creating a little space between ourselves and the critic, so we don't get swept up in it. For example, when that inner critic begins, when you hear those thoughts, that voice, you could try taking a few deep breaths, focusing on how the air feels going in and out, and allowing yourself to feel present and safe in the moment. The fourth thing you can try to help quiet the inner critic is journaling to process thoughts. As INFJs, we often benefit from writing down our feelings because it helps us to externalize our inner thoughts and reflect on them from a more objective perspective. Journaling can help us to separate the voice of the inner critic from our true, authentic self. We can use journaling to process negative thoughts and gently challenge them, or even to list things that we're proud of or grateful for. This practice can help create a more balanced narrative about ourselves. As an example, when you're journaling, you could write down a negative thought that's bothering you, then counter it, so kind of like reframing, so countering it with a more compassionate or neutral perspective, such as, "I didn't meet my own expectations, but I'm proud of how hard I tried." Sorry to interrupt, guys, but before we go into the last two things you can do to help silence the inner critic, I just want to quickly touch on journaling again. I've had so many INFJs tell me that they want to start a journaling practice, but they're actually a little bit confused on how to begin, what to write, what it should look like, or even how to journal properly, which I totally get, and I had to learn from someone else too. So I just wanted to share my mini course with you, Journaling Techniques for Healing and Transformation. It's a really beautiful course. I'm so proud to present this one to you. and I would love for you to check it out. I originally had this out a year ago, but I've since updated it. It's beautiful, there are so many resources on it, PDFs, and 9 lessons. I truly believe that journaling can be one of the most powerful tools that an INFJ can implement into their lives, especially if an INFJ wants to help silence the inner critic. So check out the link in my description. The 5th thing that you could try to help quiet the inner critic is setting realistic expectations. As idealists, us INFJs sometimes set impossibly high standards for ourselves, which can fuel the inner critic. Instead of aiming for perfection, it's helpful to focus on the progress. Setting more realistic, achievable goals and allowing space for mistakes and growth, it can ease the pressure. And this is something that I've had to learn to do within my business is, yes, I have a massive vision and massive goals, but I also have broken it down to smaller goals and to smaller milestones that I can reach that I can then celebrate. This doesn't mean settling for mediocrity, but accepting that doing your best is enough. So as another example, instead of aiming to doing everything perfectly, you can try setting goals like complete this project to the best of my ability and acknowledge that your best may look different each day. And I have a perfect example of that in my Muay Thai boxing. So I remember my trainer once said to me that your 100% today might not look like your 100% tomorrow. Sometimes we turn up and we're tired, we're sick, we've had big weeks. But if you're doing your best, that's still 100%, even if it doesn't look your best compared to other days when you have more energy and you have more, you're not sick and you have that ability to push even harder. And lastly, the 6th thing that you can try to help quiet the inner critic is creating space for quiet reflection. INFJs recharge best when we have that time to reflect and process our thoughts. Taking a break from the constant busyness and giving ourselves permission to rest can then reduce the intensity of the inner critic, whether that's through reading, meditating, or simply taking a walk. INFJs can benefit from quiet moments where we don't feel the pressure to perform or be perfect. In fact, if you feel like your inner critic is getting louder and louder and louder, that might be a good chance to ask yourself, when was the last time I took a break? When was the last time I stopped to celebrate my achievements? Something that you could try is setting time aside each day for a quiet walk in nature or just a few minutes of meditation to allow your mind to rest and regain balance. For me, I love swimming at nighttime when the kids are in bed. I love going out into the pool, swimming and floating on my back and just watching the stars in the sky. I find that so beautiful. Well, INFJ, I hope this was helpful for you. Just remember that you're not alone in having an inner critic. You're not the only one who struggles with this constant loud voice in your head. I promise you though that it doesn't always need to be this way. You can silence that voice. You can allow yourself to live a life that is more peaceful inside your mind and your heart. If you want to share your own experiences of having an inner critic, then please feel free to write about it in the comments. Everybody here is so supportive. Otherwise, watch this next video. Whatever it is that YouTube is recommending to you right now is probably the video for you. See you then.